The Five Rings Podcast, Road to Tokyo on the Sports Podcasting Network. Your weekly fix leading up to the 2020 Olympic Games with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramée. Follow us and listen to us live on Twitter at Five Rings Podcast and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network for more content.
Good day, good night, and welcome to the Five Rings Podcast. I'm Kevin Laramée, joined by Duane Rollins. As always, a bonus show for you today. Of course, yesterday we had a great show with Evan Dunphy, 2019 World Race Walking bronze medalist, and we talked about the Canadian Olympic Committee's decision not to go to Tokyo 2020, but it's not the only thing. No one will go to Tokyo 2020 because the Olympic Games have been postponed to a future date that could go all the way to maybe summer 2021, Duane.
Yeah, exactly. And look, well, according to the Olympics, it still will be Tokyo 2020, regardless of when it happens. But we'll talk about that maybe in a minute. It's the right decision. Clearly the right decision. I think it was a decision that was always going to happen, but it was forced out a little quicker by the actions of countries like Canada and Australia coming out so quickly to say that they would not send, well, in Canada's case, overtly, outright saying they wouldn't send athletes. In Australia's case, saying that they probably wouldn't send athletes. And then other organizations like USA Track and Field and Swimming suggesting the same. Once that happened, you know, the horse was out of the barn, so to speak. Or is it the cows out of the barn or the horse out of the barn? I always forget. Anyway, both. An animal was in the barn. Yeah.
They're both gone.
There were no animals in the barn. So at that point in time, you needed to move quickly on this. And today they have done so, and it is the right decision. Now, it is still to me, it is a 90% of the way there decision. They have not, the language they used is no later than July 2021. So to me, that means you need to set a date sooner rather than later, because there is a big difference between July next year and November of this year.
Or November. No, absolutely. And then it gets to complicated. So let's start there. The language used, and it's like the language used by the National Hockey League on their website, saying, oh yeah, we believe that our capacity to execute the entirety of the next upcoming season. It's wording that are not saying anything, but they're saying a lot at the same time. It's the same here. They don't want to postpone up to a year, but they're not sure how long, they're not sure how when. They want to give themselves a leeway if this thing dies down in the next few weeks, which it probably won't. Here's my thinking, and this is not news, this is not a fact, but a couple days ago, Duane, we did hear there was a 4-week period, and they were going to make an announcement in 4 weeks concerning about the Olympics, and either postponement or something. So now I think we're going to have that same timeline. Maybe in 4 weeks' time, we're going to know the actual dates. And the thing is, with 2021 and the feasibility of postponing it is feasible. But it is a lot of money and a lot of negotiation that needs to happen to, just think about it, venues that were going to become other things. Olympic Village was becoming condos for people that bought the condos and were going to move in after the games. You need that to be postponed. You're not going to build brand new Olympic Village. You just need to postpone the sale of that condo with penalties if so, or hopefully people are understanding also in that part of the market, but it's business and it's real estate. So understanding is probably not going to be a part of these business relationships. So there's a lot of things to iron out, to negotiate, to make sure that it is possible. We're just looking at venues, travel. We're looking at a lot of things that needs to be at least double checked before you can say, okay, it will be next summer for sure.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Olympic Village, and this is an area that I think very few people think of, but it's actually one of the biggest logistical issues of any games bid. I look at the city I'm in, 2015, they hosted the Pan Am Games. They could host the Pan Am Games tomorrow, literally tomorrow, if it wasn't for the Athletes Village. But you got to put these people somewhere, and they don't have the capacity to do so. So you would need to figure that out. So that's a very vital thing. You're right, though, Kevin. I think that 4 weeks was giving themselves a logistical wiggle room and faint hope is what it was. They were hoping that was
case. Yeah. A miracle cure. Someone decided to mix 2 medications together and they find a miracle cure. And in a week, it's not a story anymore, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, a true act of God. It just disappears or something within 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden you go back on it. But no, you can't do that realistically, because look, when you talked about the NHL a second ago, the problem that the big North American leagues are going to have, NBA, NFL, NHL, NBA, is that they can't just start back up. They're going to have a training camp now, and that's pushing everything back more. So basically, it's the same thing with the Olympics, only even more extreme, because you have to provide your athletes the proper opportunity to train. And by the time this is done, let's say in 2 weeks there's a miracle cure. They've basically been shut down for 6 weeks at that point. You're going to need to give them months to properly train. You'd have to give them some time to have some test events out there. You're going to have to qualify these things. There's a lot of stuff going on. So realistically, I would think the earliest you could possibly hold these games would be probably into January, February, but then you're having a summer games in the winter, and they're reluctant to do that even when they're in the southern hemisphere, let alone when they're not. So that's not go there. It'd be a little weird to watch some curling and at night and then flip on the track and field, right? Like that just doesn't seem to work.
Well, it feel like today, which is pretty much what was on my TV. At one point, there was some weird other stuff, and at some point, oh sure, curling, why not?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of repeat curling on over the next few days. So TSN has a lot in the bags.
Sportsnet also. It's pretty much the only thing Sportsnet has. It's the Grand Slam. But anyways, continue. Sorry.
Well, yeah. So look, if you're going into the start of next year, you might as well wait till the summer. Now, they may decide to go spring next year rather than full into July, and I don't think that's that big of a difference if they start a season with the Olympics. But regardless, the point I'm making is they need to give a date. If they say, it's going to be March 30th to April 15th next year, then sure, that's what we're working towards. I think they'd be better off, and I think it would be prudent for them to say it's the same dates next year. They probably have some stuff to work out. There's things you're going to need to do logistically within the city of Tokyo to make that happen. But I believe that the city of Tokyo is going to work with them. And again, this is where the 4-week thing comes out with. Yeah. I just don't understand why they needed to be pushed by Canada and Australia and others to do that, to make the obvious choice, right?
So where do we erect a monument to Canada, Poland, and Australia? Well, Canada, Australia, and Poland, respectively, with the bigger part of that monument being Canada. Anyways, it will be remembered. Canada will be remembered on the right side of history here, like Dick Bound and multiple athletes said. We actually know more what happened behind the scenes with that famous meeting that happened with the Athlete Council between Sunday night and Sunday afternoon. And Rosie McLennan actually had a lot of weight in that discussion. And it's good to know that athletes that we respect, like Evan Dunphy, like Rosie McLennan. By the way, we respect most athletes. It's not like 99.9% of them. So it's fun to see that athletes, even though one particular athlete like Rosie McLennan that had more to lose than to gain in this position was an advocate to postpone. It is great to see athletes putting their personal benefit, their personal risk when it comes to fulfilling your Olympic dream or not in second, and first public health and Canadian opinion as a whole first, and respect of their health as a whole, as a nation, as a travelers and stuff. So it was fun to see, and it's good to see athletes like Rosie McLennan were really instrumental, like Philippe Marquis also, in that meeting.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, you're looking at athletes. These are not small name athletes either, right? Like these are athletes that are giving up something potentially. I mean, in Rosie's case, she's trying to do something that no Canadian has ever done. That's to repeat 3 Olympics in a row. So this is putting a wrench in a lot of people's plans, and for them to be this ready to potentially put that at risk I think shows how important this issue is. You say that we respect most athletes. That is absolutely true. Lance Armstrong, not so much. Other than that, I can pretty much go with anyone out there, Kevin, but let's throw Lance under the bus.
Let's not start on Lance, okay, because we can have a really hot debate here. And we're going to need things to talk about anyways, because our road to Tokyo just got a whole lot longer. So the road to Tokyo 2020 just got a little bit longer. So we might be able to do this summer a show if there's a Tour de France about Lance Armstrong and the nuances of that case. But fine, I'll give it to you for today, and let's agree to reconvene on that debate on another day.
Fair enough. I'm curious to see the defense of Lance Armstrong. It's not so much that he did it; it's what happened after that makes me
That's fine. You got a point there. Great. I'm not gonna. Okay, we got a point there also.
Yes, but moving on from someone who will not be in the Olympics anytime soon, ever, for that matter, both for age and suspended reasons. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm at the point. This is you go through the stages of grief, right? And the stages of grief for the Olympics have been building, even though it's just been announced. By the time it was announced, I think we all knew, right? It wasn't a mystery anymore. It wasn't shocking anymore. Even by the time Canada pulled out, certainly that was still a bit of an initial. But then it was our quick realization that, okay, well, this was coming, and it's better to have it out now than hold on forever, because I think the longer they waited, the more they were putting things at risk, right? And I think playing these games in 2020, had they gone the absolute insane way and tried to hold the games, what you would have seen is tons of individual athletes pulling out, and the games would have been a farce. So this gives us a chance to regroup, to regather our thoughts, to regather our focus, and come back strong, and hopefully have a celebration in 2021 that will really feel earned at the time. And then it also sets up, Kevin, if you want to really think ahead, and assuming we don't have any other roadblocks in the way, we get 3 Olympics in 4 years. That's fun.
Oh my Lord, yeah, that could be quite a stretch. It'll be quite fun. Yeah, it's true. 3 Olympics in 4 years: 2021, 2022, and 2024. So 2023 we'll be just sleeping for about 12 months straight, because we're going to be exhausted. We'll have a Euro, and then a World Cup the year after that. So 2 back-to-back years of Euro and World Cup in the same summer. And the Olympics also at the same time. That's really busy.
Yeah,
busy summer.
Got the Women's World Cup in 23, so it's all good. Lots to do. Look, it gives it. I think that this is good in a way. I mean, I'm ready for them to be back. I didn't need that big of a mix. This is the longest by far that I've ever gone without watching a sporting event in my life. But it does, I think, make us appreciate what we have a little bit, or what we had anyway, a little bit more, and that's a positive thing. And I think with the Olympic movement, there has been not, it's not widespread, but there has been some people out there that are pushing back against it, and even some people that are openly hoping for it to fail. And I think that if it can emerge from this stronger and learn to react a little bit quicker, then maybe there can be some positives yet to come from this. But what matters to me is that, we have always in the show had an ambivalent take at times. We recognize the problems, but we also love the underlying philosophy behind these games, going back to the original modern games, the original start of them. They wanted to be a gathering of youth and a gathering of peace and understanding, and opening the world up to people. And I truly do believe in that. And I also love the sport. I love the competition. Unfortunately for myself, I was born 5'6" and not fast enough, right? I was never going to be an Olympian, but I can enjoy the movement through the measures, like having the show and just being a fan. And I will miss that in this summer, but hopefully I will, be able to come back stronger next year and see this through until several more Olympiads, until I'm squinting through, my blind eyes and hoping to see one last triple jump before I go.
Yeah, that could be fun. Before a last triple jump, if that sport's still included in the Olympics, but that's another question. So we've talked about the logistical aspect of postponing the Olympics when it's talking about the Olympic Village, where the athletes will stay. Venues also, some venues have plans for the future that does not include becoming sports venues. The thing is, with Tokyo, there was a lot of venues that were already in use, but so there'll be other events that were going to take place in the Tokyo Dome or in the Saitama or any other arenas that were going to be used. Budokan or whatever the case may be, they're going to have to be rescheduled the year after also. So there's a lot of other events in Tokyo. Tokyo is a very eventful city. There's amazing event happening on a weekend, on a daily basis in Tokyo. So there will be a lot of events needing to be postponed that were already planned for 2021. So the logistic of the infrastructure is also very difficult, the same as the infrastructure of the hospitality side of the athletes and the Olympic Village. Now let's talk about the preparation of the athletes. We've talked with Evan Dunphy yesterday how it was unfair to ask athletes that can barely get out of their house. And I was looking and listening to Lolo Jones being interviewed on a American TV channel earlier today, and she was talking about how her sports and the hurdles, she can't train right now. It's not like she can train in hurdles in her freaking social distancing apartment. She can't. And because a lot of athletes traveled before it was mandated that travels were banned, well, a lot of athletes are quarantined, so they couldn't train. It was very difficult for them to be able to have any exercise. So the stress that, the Olympics are coming, I don't know if it's going to be canceled, am I going to be up for it? That stress has now moved on to something different. The athletes can focus on fighting COVID-19. If they're affected, they can just focus on changing their mindset, because it's going to be a big mental hurdle for a lot of athletes, just because you've been gearing yourself for that date for so long. And there's going to be what I call a depression aspect to it, where a lot of athletes, it's a year more, it's making that commitment, that change in your mind, that transition. It's 1 year more of sacrifice. It's a lot. It's a lot to an athlete that may be late in his career, that is looking forward to not having to train this hard every day, and is already thinking, and now you're adding a year. We might see athletes decide not to go to the Olympics and retire, and we might see athletes decide to push through and have the rekindle of its spark. For the preparations of the athletes, this is primordial. This is, of course, important, but it will also have a lot of consequences.
For sure, there'll be a lot of tough conversations that have to take place both with themselves and with their loved ones in the next few days. I'm sure that there's some wedding venues that have been booked for July 2021 that might hopefully have some return policies, like stuff like that. Sponsors have to be factored into this. I thought it was interesting having this conversation yesterday when we brought this up, and he acknowledged that the Olympics are the biggest of the big, but and I think I knew this understandably and instinctively, but it still is interesting to hear every time from an athlete's perspective, like Evan. It's about the challenge and about those individual competitions that don't have the same amount of attention that an Olympics has, still matter to them in a way that maybe even you and I, as geeks in this, don't see to the same level, right? Like, within a track and fields athlete, they still have next year's world championship to sort of focus on now. And I'm sure that's what they're already doing. Is okay, well, that's, assuming that happens based on the Olympics, they might decide to move that out a year. But nonetheless, that would be something that they'd be looking at. You have other events coming here. You can just, go to an empty track and run to try and push your time. But they're not necessarily as hyper focused on the 5 rings as maybe some of us sometimes think. It's obviously a massive goal for them, but it's not the be all end all in a way that we as fans sometimes think it is. So that might make it easier for some athletes that are 32 or
younger, in their career. If you're 30, if you're 38, ask Serena Williams if she really cares about the ATP 500 tournament that she has to go into middle of nowhere in Chattanooga or something, and if that's as important as Wimbledon. I think you get that aspect also. Like Lindsey Vonn, at the end of her career, she couldn't do the Olympics, and eventually decided that it was going to be it, right? So I understand a lot where athletes like Evan, and for me also, when you're not just, oftentimes when you become an Olympic athlete, it's not just because you're good at that sport, it's because you love it, like probably no one else that loves it. And that brings you from loving that Minsk meet of race walking that is awesome, that we've watched a few years ago, but it's not for everyone. So I think there's a little bit of that, but I agree with you. And sometimes if as an athlete, you do not have that fire to go compete in Minsk or in the World Cup event in Timbuktu to qualify, and you looking at it as a chore, then you're right. Maybe that conversation will be a bit more difficult, and it will be a tough conversation that you will need to have with yourself and with your loved ones.
Well, I always think of, if you haven't had the chance to read Andre Agassi's biography, order it from Amazon. You have some time in your hand. It's a great read. It's one of the best athlete biographies I've ever read. There's a conversation he recalls in the book between himself and his wife, Steffi Graf. And he gives Steffi this very confessional conversation. He admits to her for the first time that he's admitted to anyone out loud that he hates tennis. And her response to him was, "Oh, honey, everyone hates tennis that does it professionally at this point." there's people out there that have been training and doing this so long that another year might just seem daunting to them. There's lots of people like Evan that love it and it drives them, sure, but there's the other side of it. And I mean, we look at another Canadian athlete that we talk about a lot between all of our shows in Christine Sinclair. She is 1 year older for someone at that stage of their career. She's in her late 30s. Might be it. You might hit that wall. You might be a forced retirement in that case. So this is not insignificant, a 1 year shift in the cycle by any means. And it's unfair in a sort of cosmic way, but it is the fairest way to deal with what is a completely unprecedented and unexpected circumstance.
Also, I believe there'll be financial ramifications to this COVID-19 world. I do believe that if we look at sponsors for athletes, there's a very high probability that some athletes will lose sponsors in the next couple of few months, not because of companies wanting to not sponsor, because companies will go bankrupt. Companies that exist right now and sponsor athletes might not be able to in the coming months, and that will change things going into the future. It will change how athletes view their own training camps, how things change. Things will evolve. So that's another aspect to it. And it will also evolve from advertising dollars to television to network, and it will influence the broadcast of the game next year. The ramification of COVID-19 and the postponement of the Olympic Games, when you start to look at it, influences almost every aspect of the said Olympic Games.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no doubt that there will be negative impacts to COVID-19 throughout the world, including sport. The question is, how do we react to them? And I think when it comes to the Olympic movement, one thing that I believe in very, very strongly is that the ideas behind it and the base drive to compete in these sports is so great that they will overcome anything and that they will survive anything. Maybe there'll be a bit of a blip in the curve upwards in terms of the performances and so on. Maybe that blip even lasts a cycle or two because of lost sponsorship, lost athletes having to retire early, so on and so forth. That's possible, but they'll keep going. They will. They'll always keep going. That's why you can never kill this thing, right? You know, maybe the idea of the IOC might die one day, but these sports will continue to go on. This can't kill it. It can only make it stronger. What was the saying? What was the COC's postpone now, conquer tomorrow? That was their tagline? Yeah.
Postpone today, conquer tomorrow.
So I think that's a pretty worthwhile. It's as a marketer, I appreciate a good tagline, and that's a good tagline, but it's also a tagline that has some meaning behind it, which all the best ones do. Postpone today, conquer tomorrow.
Hashtag postpone today, conquer tomorrow. We should probably copyright that right now, and maybe we'll make a little bit more money, and maybe we can go cover Tokyo next year.
Yeah, we still have a year now. Patreon.com/sportspodcasting network. Save your money for now, but unless you can't afford it. But
yeah, exactly. I'm not going to say no because everyone is affected by this thing. But going forward also, for the fairness of the games, there's the age aspect. And postponing a year opens up a Pandora's box of athletes that weren't available and eligible for this games that could be. Or athletes that are eligible that, if rules change, won't be. And that's across different sports. We're obviously off the top of our head thinking of the men's soccer tournament, the U23 aspect. Some U23 players won't be U23, but maybe you can just stick with the cutoff date of the birth they had before. But I'm also thinking of gymnastics, where some athletes would have been too young if this would have happened now, and maybe now they have a chance to qualify for next year that they wouldn't. In the spirit of the games, in the spirit of sportsmanship and fairness, should you be able as an athlete to qualify for the games if you were not going to be able to do so in 2020? More in the aspect of a young gymnast that might be eligible for 2021 wouldn't be in 2020. Do you open that Pandora's box? What is the ideal way to deal with it? Because sometimes gymnasts would have been in their perfect, I would say their prime, and because the Olympics fall in different years, they don't compete when they're 20. They compete only when they're 18 or 22. You know what I mean? So what would you do? What is the ideal way to deal with the age eligibility of a postponed Olympic Games?
I think there's reason by the IOC's insistence that the games be called Tokyo 2020. And that reason has to do with what you're speaking to, that athletes that have already qualified in their events or their teams will continue to do so because they qualified for 2020. So there's no confusion about what's going on, even though it's a different calendar year. The same, I believe, will go for eligibility, which is not a lot of sports, but it is some, as you mentioned. The two that you mentioned are probably the most obvious. I think that it will effectively be a U24 soccer tournament, although, when it's always talked about the men's soccer tournament, there's more going on than that. So it might be a U24 tournament, but they'll probably mostly be still U23 anyway, because of just the having to negotiate with the club teams to release them. And those club teams also are going to be
Euro. So there's going to be the Euro. That doesn't change.
Exactly. We'll have tons of time to talk about the men's soccer tournament and the build up to this, but it will be very affected by this because of that very reason. You're going to have a lot of soccer being played. So, just let's talk Canada for a half second. Think out of some miracle that Canada qualifies for the men's soccer tournament. Alphonso Davies, do you think Bayern Munich's going to want him to play in that tournament if they're having to play more games in their season, which looks likely? They're going to have to squeeze more competitions in there, et cetera, et cetera? Probably not. So, there are going to be impacts there, but I think gymnastics is the one that, both in the terms of its popularity in the Olympic movement from fans, it in many ways is, I would put it in the top 5 sports, if not, to some people, it is what the gymnastics competition is the Olympics for some people.
Yeah.
That's a huge one. So it's going to be affected if they add the wrinkle of allowing the 2021 16-year-olds to come in. So I can't do the math off the top of my head here. What year would that put them at? Born in
16-year-old, it would be 2004.
Oh my heavens! Anyway. So, yes, they're born during the Athens Games. Great. Anyway.
I remember people that competed in Sydney. I knew them.
Anyhow. So did
I ever tell you that when I was in high school, 2000, so I guess that was my 4th year of high school here in Quebec during the Athens Game Bowl after. So that would have been, so maybe a year after. I'm talking to my supplement, my substitute math teacher, and he talks about this. And oh yeah, I'm a track and field coach also. I'm like, oh really? He's like, oh yeah, I just came back from Athens. Oh really? Yeah, I'm the coach of Nicolas Macrozonaris. I was like, gee, that's the fastest guy in Canada. You're the coach of him, and you're my math teacher. Who cares about 2 + 2? How do I run fast?
There you go. By getting fast twitch muscles moving quicker.
He told me something about losing 60 pounds. I'm like, okay. What's the cosinus of what's the tangent again? Thank you, math teacher.
Lose 60 pounds and be dedicated to training.
Okay, that's not for me.
And you still might not be fast enough. So.
I would not be fast enough.
Exactly. To go back to my answer, for gymnastics, I just think you extend it so it's a little older field, which is fine. It's, as I said, that I don't. Is jokes aside, when they first came out, though, we have to call it Tokyo 2020. I'm like, oh, that's funny, haha. They don't want to reprint the shirts. But then I got thinking about it, and I think it has more to do with stuff like this.
Well, but there's also an aspect to it of the shirts, but it's not just shirts. It's the shirts, every second logo printed on on things they use to compete. When you think of an Olympic Games, production values are compared to anything else in the world, right? When you're looking at sport itself, you're looking at, just example, the archery competition and the target itself. It's so well decorated with the logo. It's well done. It's manufactured. It's machined. All these things are amazing, right? And that comes with a logo. And to redo all of this for a damn 2021 instead of 2020, you're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars and wasted resources. That would be silly to even think about it when you think about it.
Yeah, and it's the games of the blank Olympiad. I can never keep track of how many they are, but 20-something. So that's what really kind of numbers it in a different way already anyway. So, look, in the grand scheme of things, this is the least of our concerns right now. I today have, now that we've refocused on 2021, I suspect that that's what they'll come down with. I don't think they're going to try a fall games. I don't think they're that crazy. Now that we have that, I can start to look forward to it again. Whereas the last month or so, as a huge Olympic guy, it was almost dreadful to think about it because all I could think of is cancellation.
He's like, please don't cancel the party. Just postpone it, but tell me it's going to happen.
And I suspect that the very worst case scenario, as I said before, like we were talking about this as it relates to the next Winter Games, which of course are in Asia as well. If we're talking about this by that time, we have a hell of a lot more to worry about than sport. So if we're pushing this again from 2021, I mean, maybe it's time for us to focus on other things, right? So it's something to look forward to now. And this summer is, that's more my concern right now, is that I get some summer. I would like to be able to, be in a patio before the end of the year. But right now, at least we have something to maybe look forward to next summer. Well, we have the Euros, so let's hope.
Yep, let's hope. But we'll know more just in a year, but we'll know more in 4 weeks when it comes to the actual official dates, I believe. And you know what? I think you're right. Just get the same dates and just put in 2021. That would be a lot easier for everyone. It'd be a lot easier for all the competitions. Just follow the same calendar just 1 year later. That would be the ideal scenario. But what is your ideal scenario for the Olympic Games? Let us know. sportspodcastingnetwork@gmail.com, 5ringspodcast@gmail.com. You can also contact us on social media at 24th Minute for Duane, at Kev Laramée for myself, and at 5 Rings Podcast for this show. We'll be right back next week with another edition of this great Olympic podcast, the longest running Olympic podcast in the entire world. But as always, until then, stay safe, wash your hands, and also do not forget to wash your phones. There's a lot of cracks. There's a lot of things that happen in phones. Make sure you wash your phones.
For more content.